Hello, this is Mr. Happy. So E3 is now over, and I think it is time to give it a review. So I'll be going through each individual conference and reviewing it individually, and then I'll be taking the average score, and that'll be the overall score for E3 2018. So starting with EA. EA kicked the show off pretty badly. They showed Battlefield 5. Looks fine, I guess. I'm not gonna get it though. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was announced. No gameplay at all, just the title and the time setting. Um, I'm pretty excited for that, but they didn't really show a whole lot of it. That was actually one of the most exciting moments of the conference for me. Yeah, that just shows the quality of the conference. Um, Next, they showed Battlefront 2 Clone Wars DLC, which looks pretty cool. Then they showed Unravel 2 and Sea of Solitude, two indie games in the EA Originals program. Those were also highlights of the show. And then they showed off Anthem, which looks, I mean, visually and environmental wise, it looks very, very interesting. But I don't really know, aside from that, if it's going to be really worth playing. Kind of looks like Destiny, but sort of more open. And like I said, the environments look very interesting. Visually looks great. But aside from that, I don't really know. So overall, the EA press conference was just alright, I guess. So I decided to give it a 6.5. So not really alright, just pretty meh, not great. So moving on, next we had Xbox. And wow, Xbox really brought the big guns to the show. They started off with a release trailer for Halo Infinite. That's quite a ways off. It'll be a few years because they've like created an entirely new engine and stuff. But anyway, it's good to know about that it exists. Then they showed Ori and the Will of the Wisp, which looks so pretty. It's such a beautiful game. Then they showed Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. That was another big game that they showed from Software. From Software. I guess that works. Um, yeah, that basically seemed like Ninja Dark Souls, and so that's all I need to say on that one. Then they showed off The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, which is a free game actually coming this month from Don't Nod, taking place in the Life is Strange universe. And I'm I'm all down for free games, and I love Life is Strange, so yeah, that's a double win. Then they showed off more Crackdown 3, announced that it's been delayed to 2019, showed Forza Horizon 4, which takes place in Britain, which is like one of my favorite places ever. So that's pretty awesome. Um, then they announced that they got a bunch of new studios. Quite a few of them were expected, like Playground and Undead Labs. Um, but then some other ones were not, such as Ninja Theory. That's probably the biggest news. Like Ninja Theory, that's huge. So anyway, yeah, they announced that. Then they showed off Devil May Cry 5. That's a huge announcement. It had been leaked ahead of time, but that's huge, and it looks really really great. Next off, they showed Cuphead DLC, so that's pretty great for people who love that game. I still need to play that game. It looks so good. Um, then they showed Dying Light 2, which looks to be a lot better than the first Dying Light, and like the first Dying Light was like a pretty solid game. But this seems to be a lot more focused on shaping the world based on your choices. It sounds very, very interesting. Next, they gave a little tease for Battletoads, a new Battletoads game. I don't know whether it's a remake of the first, it might be, but they didn't really give a whole lot of details on that. Then they showed off Gears of War 5, which looks great. They're focusing on Kate, who was, the only good character from Gears 4. So, yeah, that's pretty awesome. And then they acted like they were closing off the show, but then they showed a nice big trailer for Cyberpunk 2077. That's absolutely huge. So yeah, Xbox's conference was kind of insane. Like very, very, very insane. So yeah, I'm giving them a 9 out of 10. It was an excellent conference, just hands down amazing. Next up, we've got Bethesda. So Bethesda started it off by showing us some more of Rage 2, made some jokes about Walmart Canada leaking it and all that. Wow, that game looks so great. I mean, like, that's just such a great combination. The gameplay of, id combined with the open world of Avalanche. That's so cool. Um, Also with the sort of style of Mad Max a little bit, because Avalanche did make Mad Max. Um, Next, the other big thing that they showed off from id is Doom Eternal, which is basically Doom 2. They just gave us a short tease, basically saying that it exists, and it looks awesome because it's Doom. Yeah. Then they showed off Prey DLC, which I know not many people bought Prey, to be honest, but this DLC actually looks really good, like almost better than the real game, if I'm honest. So yeah, definitely great for people who bought that game. Next up, Wolfenstein Youngblood. New Wolfenstein game, probably not like a full main entry. Um, Seemed to be more of a side thing, like the Old Blood, but like it's actually its own game. Sort of more like Dishonored Death of the Outsider, I would say. Yeah, and you're playing as BJ Blazkowicz's twin daughters, and it's set in the 1980s, and you can play it all in co-op. That sounds pretty awesome. Then they showed a lot of Fallout 76. They focused on it quite a lot, and personally, I absolutely loved what they showed. I know a lot of people are not sure about it. It's quite mixed, but personally, I absolutely loved everything that they showed about it. Um, then they showed the Elder Scrolls Blades, which is a mobile Elder Scrolls game, which at first sounds really bad, but it actually looks pretty good. Like, I'm very impressed that it's running on a phone, and just the quality of the gameplay looks really, really great as well. I especially like that you can basically build and customize your own town. I'm always into like town building stuff. I absolutely love that. Um, and then they finished the show off by doing a tease for Starfield, their new basically Elder Scrolls or Fallout in space, which sounds pretty awesome. And then Elder Scrolls 6. They just did a really, really short tease, didn't really tell us anything at all. But yeah, just acknowledging the fact that it exists so people stop asking, pretty much. So yeah, overall, excellent conference from Bethesda. Like, it was absolutely amazing. So I'm giving them an 8.5 out of 10. Next, we have Square Enix, and theirs was one of the worst conferences, to be honest. Not because the games that they showed were bad, but because they really didn't announce almost anything new. Like, it was basically like they just really didn't even need to have a conference at all because almost everything that they showed had also been shown at like another conference, mostly Xbox. So they did show off, the stuff that they showed at other conferences like Kingdom Hearts 3, Just Cause 4, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, stuff like that. And the only two new announcements that they had were Babylon's Fall, which is actually a bigger announcement than I think a lot of people really realize because it's a new game from Platinum, a new IP from Platinum. And Platinum makes like excellent action games, so that's pretty huge. And then also The Quiet Man, which seems to be a brawler, which looks pretty interesting. But overall, the quality of their games was great, but they didn't really show enough new to really even need a press conference. So I give them a 7 out of 10. Next up, we've got Ubisoft, um, or Ubisoft, if you want to pronounce it properly. Ubisoft showed off quite a bit. They showed off Beyond Good and Evil 2 at the start after Just Dance 2019. We're not going to talk about that. Well, I guess we should talk about it because it is a review. So yeah, they did an overly long, unnecessary showcase for Just Dance 2019. Then they showed Beyond Good and Evil 2, and they actually showed pre-alpha gameplay this time. And I am so hyped for this game. Just the sheer ambition of it looks absolutely insane. Um, Next, they showed off Trials Rising, which is pretty great. That franchise hasn't gotten a new game for quite some time, and it's a pretty great franchise. Next, they showed quite a bit of gameplay for The Division 2. Honestly, it looks pretty good, just not really my thing. Also, they showed off, like, I think a bit too much since they already showed quite a bit at Xbox's conference, but it does look like a solid game. Um, then they showed off some of the Donkey Kong DLC for Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. That looks really good. They had a really, really great band actually doing like Donkey Kong covers, which was pretty cool. That was pretty much the only good musical performance out of the many, many musical performances. at E3. Um, then they showed off a lot of Skull and Bones gameplay, and I'm still not sold on it, but it definitely looks better than last year when they showed it off. I really like the idea of, upgrading your ship a lot. I really like ship customization. That sounds pretty cool. And just becoming this like ultra powerful pirate, That's just such a cool idea to me. After that, they showed off Starlink Battle for Atlas, and I was like, oh, this game, it looks fine, I guess, but kind of for kids. It's kind of like Skylanders, but a dogfighting game. Except then they showed off Star Fox will be a play that the fact that Star Fox will be a playable character, or Fox McCloud, will be a playable character through the entire game, and he'll actually like take part in a lot of the story, I guess, in the Switch version. And so now I'm thinking maybe I'll get this. I'll see. It looks pretty interesting. Um, now that Star Fox is in it. Um, and then lastly, they spent quite a while focusing on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And I loved it personally. I am definitely getting the game. I honestly wasn't really a fan of Origins. I didn't get that because honestly, I don't like ancient Egypt really at all, but ancient Greece I absolutely love. So if they just basically put Origins but improved and taking place in ancient Greece, I'm quite happy with that. So that was it for Ubisoft. Overall, a pretty solid conference, so I'm giving them a 7.5 out of 10. Next up, we have Sony, and they also had kind of a weird conference. Um, yeah, they decided instead of just showing off a ton of trailers, they were just gonna focus on a few specific large titles, specifically The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Death Stranding, and Spider-Man. Um, so yeah, they didn't really announce a whole lot aside from showing the gameplay for those games. But the gameplay they did show looked excellent. They started off with The Last of Us Part 2, and wow, that game looks incredible. It's exactly what I wanted. They've kept it almost like the gameplay is almost exactly like the original, just improved, which is 100% what I wanted. It also looks like Melee has been very much improved, which is probably the one combat edition I would most want. So yeah, absolutely amazing for The Last of Us Part 2. Then they showed Ghost of Tsushima, the first gameplay for that as well, and I was just stunned by how beautiful that game looks. Like, I don't even know, they didn't really show enough combat or enough for me to really get a full scope of the game, except the art style looks, I'm so in love with the art style. And it looks so amazing. Also, the bit that they showed didn't exactly look open world, um, but I assume it is open world, so we'll have to see how that turns out. Anyway, that game looks really, really good. Next, they showed off Control, which is a new game from Remedy that looks quite similar to Quantum Break, but like better because Quantum Break had a lot of issues with it, and this is obviously on PS4 because Remedy have kind of stopped their whole thing with Microsoft. Um, yeah, it looks very interesting. You've got this really cool pistol that like changes shape. Very interested in that game. They also showed off gameplay, I believe some of it was gameplay, not quite sure, of the Resident Evil 2 remake, and it looks like such a good remake. Yeah, they basically made Resident Evil 2, but with like Resident Evil 4's gameplay, and in the Resident Evil 7 engine, and it looks really, really, really good. They also showed off another trailer for Kingdom Hearts 3. There was like three trailers for Kingdom Hearts 3 at E3. Um, well, I guess three trailers for Kingdom Hearts 3. That makes sense. But anyway, this showed off specifically focused on the Pirates of the Caribbean world, which I thought was super interesting because they're all realistic. Like all of the characters are like photorealistic pretty much in a Kingdom Hearts game, and I love how they're doing that. Like adapting like the graphical style for each different world. That looks really interesting. Then they showed Death Stranding. Still looks very weird, but we have kind of more of a scope on what you'll be doing, and it looks like you'll be delivering packages um, while trying to avoid being pulled into the ground by these weird shadows. And we still don't know what the baby is. And it still looks very, very weird, as I said. But we have a slight bit more of an idea of what it's kind of gonna be. I don't really know for sure though yet. Then they showed off a teaser for Neo 2, which is pretty great because Neo was a great game. And then they finished the show off with a bunch more gameplay of Spider-Man. They announced a bunch of more villains, and I just want to play that game at this point. It looks so good. I'm absolutely in love with that game. So yeah, Sony overall had an absolutely excellent conference. I'm giving them an 8.5 out of 10. Next up, we have Nintendo, or finally, actually, Nintendo. They're the last one. They kicked off their conference with quite a bit of gameplay, or not quite a bit, but a relatively long trailer for Daemon X Machina, which is a new game from Marvelous. It's a mech combat game um, that looks to be sort of a spiritual successor to Armored Core, and it has a really, really nice cel-shaded style. It looks really, really good. I'm very excited for that game. It's coming 2019. Then they showed off Xenoblade Chronicles 2 DLC, which looks really, really good. It seems like there's new characters and stuff, so it seems to be like a pretty substantial DLC, which is pretty great. And then they showed off Super Mario Party, which looks a lot better than I expected. It's sort of kind of a reboot of the franchise a bit. Um, and it seems to be sort of going back to its roots, which is a good thing because the last few Mario Party games were not nearly on par with some of the more original titles. And I've actually seen like quite a bit of gameplay, like about an hour of gameplay from the Nintendo Treehouse Live, and I'm very impressed with that game so far. It looks like a really great party game. Then they showed off Fire Emblem Three Houses, and wow, it looks really, really good. I'm absolutely getting that. They delayed it to 2019. It was supposed to be 2018, but I don't really care. It looks like a really, really great game. Very anime styled, which of course you'd expect from Fire Emblem, but like specifically, it seems to be very similar visually to Fire Emblem Warriors, which is pretty nice. Um, they also showed off Fortnite for Switch. Of course, we all knew that was coming. Fortunately, Sony has blocked PS4 accounts on the Fortnite version, which means I cannot basically play it. I would have to start over, which I'm just not willing to do. So I really hope Sony fixes that because everyone's just so mad at them. They just really need to fix it. And lastly, they spent about the remaining half of their conference, maybe even more than that, focused entirely on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And, well, I think it was maybe a little bit too much of a focus on Smash. I am absolutely very, very much impressed by what I did see, and I'm very, very excited for Smash. It's coming out in December, and it's got every single character that's ever been in Smash. That's including all of like, the third party characters like Cloud, Ryu, and Snake, which is pretty awesome. And also it seems to be have like basically it's the best. It's gonna be the best Smash Bros. Basically, that's what it seems like. So yeah, very impressed in that game. But overall, Nintendo didn't have a whole lot of other announcements beside that. They did have a decent amount though, so I'm going to give them an 8. So now that we've gone through every individual conference, I've averaged the score, and the overall score of E3 2018 is a 7.8. Yes, it is a 7.8, which is a little bit lower than I would have hoped, but only because EA and Square Enix sort of got it down a little bit, as well as Ubisoft brought it down just a little bit. Um, but overall, it was an excellent E3. I think that's a better score than almost any other E3 would have gotten, just because, there would be this one conference that was just like really bad. But in this case, all of the big conferences were just absolutely excellent. And so, as far as ranking, Xbox was the best E3 conference in my opinion. I think they won. Um, and then in second, actually tied for second, is Sony and Bethesda, both having amazing conferences, just not quite on the level of Xbox. They just announced so many things. Um, then after them comes Nintendo, just Not quite enough announcements. I would have liked some Metroid Prime 4. That would have been pretty great. They said it's not quite ready yet, so understandable. Um, and then, of course, after them, we have Ubisoft, who had a pretty just solid conference. Not amazing, but just solid. And then after them, we've got Square Enix, who showed all great games, but everything that was already shown to us before. Nothing really new at all, except for Babylon's Fall and The Quiet Man. And then in last, of course, we have EA, who really just had a pretty bad conference, aside from a very few minor things. So, yep, that concludes my review for E3 2018. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!